I'm coming from the upper reaches of northern Wisconsin. My internet may or may not be as stable as it otherwise might, and we'll do our best here. If things really fail, then we'll just move on to the next part of our service. But just wanted to let you know that I'm in a little bit of a wonky internet zone. Our first reading this morning is a poem written by the Reverend Sarah R. Speed entitled On My Way. You said, return to me, so here I am, skin and bones held together with memories and a little bit of duct tape. I am bringing the worst of me. Consider yourself warned, the furrowed brow, the achy back, the slew of judgments, a pocketful of assumptions, the track of negativity that runs laps in my head. I am bringing it all, because you said, return to me. Edits not required, so return I will. And not all of it will be bad. Some of it will be lovely. I will bring a wagon full of nostalgia, a melody that won't let me go, a million stories that start with the words, oh, it was beautiful. I will bring a mended heart, a glass half full, 2 lungs out of breath from dancing too long, and dreams that taste like honey. I will bring my whole messy human self because I just know deep in my bones that you are already running to meet me. There are no cuts on this team. You said you'd take it all, so here I come. Me and my humanity, we are on our way. And our biblical text this morning from the lectionary is the 32nd Psalm. Happy are those whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. You get a fresh start. Your slate is wiped clean. God holds nothing back from you. While I kept silence, my body wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was dried up as by the heat of summer. Selah. Then I confessed my sin to you. I did not hide it. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave me. Selah. Therefore, let all who are faithful offer prayer to you. At a time of distress, the rush of mighty waters shall not reach them. You are a hiding place for me. You preserve me from trouble. You surround me with glad cries of deliverance. Selah. I will instruct you and teach you the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. Steadfast love surrounds those who trust in the Lord. Be glad in the Lord and rejoice, O righteous, and shout for joy, all you upright in heart. She called it a shit show, which is pretty significant considering my mother does not swear and never raises her voice. I'm not saying that's good, I'm just saying it's true, and I know that you're here this morning, Mom. And if the psalmist were writing today, instead of almost 3,000 years ago, shit show would be part of our biblical lexicon, taking its place alongside plague, lament, being dashed against the rocks, and wailing and gnashing of teeth. In the psalm that we just heard, it was a real shit show. The psalmist's strength had completely dried up. Their body was wasting away, groaning all day and all night. Such deep despair, aware of their transgressions, their sins. We don't know the details, but we can feel the intense pain in those words. I admit that I'm really resonating with this psalm right now. My family has been going through our own shit show lately. My father has been on hospice and declining for months. I had come to Wisconsin, where I still am this morning, where my parents live on a not always easy to reach island with my sister, who helps take care of my dad along with my mom. I came a month ago for a short visit, was on my way home and ready to board a plane in Minneapolis to fly back when I realized I just couldn't leave. So I doubled back, because at that point we thought we would be losing my dad within days. Instead, he rallied, but then had another stroke. And then, a few days later, my sister, who takes care of my father, was rushed to the hospital in critical condition with a large blood clot in her aorta, blocking blood flow to the lower half of her body. They were talking about the possible need to amputate, were worried about her very life. And mind you, because they're on an island, getting it to a hospital involves taking a boat and then driving for another 2 hours. My sister's condition now means that my dad can't continue to stay in the home, but there were no nursing care beds available anywhere within 2 hours of here. And, because we seem to be also dabbling in the book of Job, my mom is losing her vision and her hearing. I don't tell you this so that you'll feel sorry for us, although prayers are certainly welcome, and I'm so grateful for the way that people have been praying and the way the church, and in particular the Staff Parish Relations Committee, have supported me being here during this time. I'm sharing it because the Psalms are powerful texts that can reflect and hold some of the stuff that we all go through. This just happens to be my story this month. You have yours. Things that might not make sense to other people, even if you had the energy or capacity to explain it all. And then there's our country and the world. There's so much suffering. The Psalms are actually songs. Some are kind of an ancient world version of the down and out country song. The Psalms don't back down. They're kind of the drama queens of our biblical texts. They don't back down from the hard realities of life. Some of the realities of the ancient Near East are different from our own. They had to worry then about people dashing children against rocks, unfit, megalomaniacal, and self-serving leaders, and plagues of frogs. But how different is that from lawmakers who want to punish parents who support and honor their trans children? Politicians frothing at the mouth, thrusting children's books into the air and hurling racist accusations at one of the most qualified Supreme Court nominees in our history. Or, instead of frogs, a virus that has devastated the entire planet and shows no signs of slowing down. It's a shit show. The word is psalter in Greek and tehillim in Hebrew. It means praises. They were prayers and praises written by and for the people of ancient Israel. They were preserved over several hundred years, attributed to King David, but likely not written by him. They were sung and revised and adapted to new circumstances, passed around, and eventually some were put to paper, parchment. They were written during periods of violent occupation, colonization, exile, wandering, banishment, betrayal, brutality, natural disaster, and loss. Sound familiar? Some of these collected psalms sing of the almost unspeakable beauty of creation, the wonders of the world, healing, restoration, the power of loving relationship, and the ongoing, irrepressible presence of God. And some are absolutely unflinching about the pain of being human, when life is a veritable shit show. If you ever want to read the Bible but you don't know where to start, the Psalms are a good place to go. It's fitting that we're reading this psalm during Lent. Lent is that period leading up to Easter when we allow ourselves to lean into the hard stuff as if we weren't already there. Jesus, in his last days of life, sharing a radical message of God's love with people who were in their own rough places. His words, his relationships, and the ways he included those marginalized from power and resources made him an enemy of the state, and they eventually came for him. It's during Lent that we look at some of the experiences of wilderness and sacrifice in our faith tradition. Some practices of giving up things as a way of connecting our story and life with the Jesus story have emerged over the last few centuries. But it's important to know that Lent is not an individualistic experience, not some kind of self-improvement plan or an ashy, moody New Year's do-over where we give up chocolate or sugar or Facebook and hope to be better people by Easter. Although if you want to give those things up, it's fine. But there is another tradition that's made its way into centuries of Christian and Jewish liturgies, and that is confession. Confessing, admitting, naming our sins. Some places, like church, have dropped this over time. Too much focus on sin, folks said. We need to be more positive about our faith, some argued. It's just a downer, they added. And yeah, way too much of Christian faith has focused on the wrath and punishment of a domineering, male-presenting, dominant culture-defending God that needed to be taken to the cleaners. But I wonder if we gave something important up when we started leaving out a place for us to not just individually, but collectively confess that we screw up. The psalmist laments about their own transgressions, their own failings, their own sin. Sin is anything which separates us from God, ourselves, one another, or the earth. And it's not just individual, it's also structural. And structural sin, like white supremacy, homophobia and transphobia, ableism, nationalism, they find their way into our individual lives. And we need a place to name it, to expose it. And we individually also make mistakes, fail ourselves, hurt others, jump the gun, move ahead too fast, leave others out. The poet Danez Smith writes, "If you are not innocent, say this, I am worthy of forgiveness," or breath after breath. Some of us need to forgive ourselves. Some of us are carrying shame and guilt for decisions we felt we had to make in order just to survive, just to make it through. There is power in seeking forgiveness, in being assured that we are forgiven without taking those things lightly or avoiding responsibility. Guilt, the poet Audre Lorde has said, may be the beginning of knowledge. So today we'll do something a little different. We'll add a place for confession in our communion liturgy. Cole Arthur Riley in Black Liturgies invites us to exhale and inhale on particular admissions and affirmations. She writes, inhale, I am not who I was. Exhale, I will stop punishing myself. Inhale, shame will not haunt me. Exhale, I forgive myself. It's good to be reminded that, like the psalmist tells us, when we're struggling or suffering or have screwed up, God's hand is on us. God's love is our refuge. God's tenderness is our solace. That's what I've tried to remind myself of this week when it felt like everything's falling apart. And there's one more thing about the Psalms, this weird word, Selah. It's actually written into the text as a kind of stage direction. These psalms, like much of the Bible we've inherited, were not meant to be read, but spoken, sung, and performed collectively. Selah means pause. Okay, really it means dramatic pause, or let that sink in. So here's part of that psalm again, and this time in a translation from the Message. When I kept everything inside, my bones turned to powder. My words became day-long groans. The pressure never let up. All the juices of my life dried up. Selah. Let that sink in. Then I let it out. I said, I'll come clean about my failures to God. And suddenly the pressure was gone. My guilt dissolved. My sin disappeared. Let that sink in. The church folks sometimes say, I'm just going to have a little talk with Jesus. It was a way of saying, and is a way of saying, I'm going to get some of this stuff off my chest and let him hold it because I just can't. We can't always make sense of our suffering. I refuse to believe that God gives or takes away disease or pain or sickness or sends it to us to make us stronger or more faithful. Sometimes stuff just happens. And sometimes it's worth noting that our suffering happens because someone else is profiting off it. But either way, The psalmist implores us to remember this. God is here. God is holding us and all our stuff. God is holding you and all your stuff. God is holding you even when you are in the middle of a shit show of biblical proportions. God holds all our pain, all our grief, all our rage, all our mess. The psalmist reminds us that God's hand is on us. Literally, God has got our back. Can you feel it? Can you imagine it? The firm pressure holding you up from behind, or the gentle touch on your shoulder or resting on your knee. From our first reading again, I will bring my whole messy human self because I just know deep in my bones that you are already running to meet me. There are no cuts on this team. You said you'd take it all, so here I come, me and all my humanity. God's love is our refuge. The Spirit is our hiding place. Even when we've screwed up and even when life, as my mom would say, is a shit show. This news, God's news, is good news. Let that sink in. Selah.